All right. All right. So since last time Felicia mentioned a bit about OBM, so I thought let's bring a little bit of OBM here. And this paper is actually recently published, I think around February. So yeah, like less than 5 days ago, it was published. So the title of the paper is Evaluation of Task Clarification and Feedback to Teach Feedback Reception Skills. So a little bit background probably for those unfamiliar with areas of research in the OBM. Feedback has been one of the most researched in the field, and it's been quite some time. It has been quite some times in looking at performance, whether in safety areas, whether in human service settings, whether in sales sometimes. So feedback has been the focus on looking at ways to improve performance. And it has been focusing on whether feedback is effective to increase the performance, to what type of feedback is effective, when should it be delivered, whether it's everyday, immediate, delayed, and weekly, monthly, that type of stuff. Also, what type of visuals or the stimuli of delivering feedback. So there were researchers looking at whether it's graph feedback is better than verbal feedback, or whether it would be video-based stimulus is better to deliver feedback, or that, or the combination of all those types of feedback. There's also research looking at what is affecting the effectiveness of feedback according to the people who delivers it. For example, I work for Felicia, but I get feedback from the operative and management side about my performance versus Felicia, who is directly supervising me, for example. So it has been looked into as well in the OBM research. So now I guess there's been a shifted in the focus where they're starting to examine the recipient of the feedback. So some individuals respond feedback by deflecting or arguing. I sense the tone deflecting or arguing in the negative way because, yeah, I think we all know that there are some contexts or situations there that we need to have discussions about the situation. It doesn't have to be like one-way feedback. But I think what they're meaning here by deflecting or arguing is that there's some disagreement there. I don't agree with your feedback, and here's why. So the issues here is that when individuals not receptive to feedback, they typically be aversive of the person delivering feedback. But this is also an issue because then if the person delivering feedback got rejected in some ways, or they feeling, the sense, all right, we always argue when I deliver feedback, you know what? Maybe subconsciously they would not be delivering feedback as much as they used to do. And it might affecting the performance eventually. And so far there has been two empirical studies evaluating the methods on how can we teach people to receive feedback. And it's been done in 2020 and 2021. So the first one, it's been done in a small company. They're teaching 3 administrative assistant staff on how to receive feedback on how to respond to emails and phone calls. So their primary job was to respond emails and chats. So that's they're targeting the skills on. And the feedback was delivered every other weekday. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and so on. And according to Early, they target 8 feedback reception skills. So this is 8 component skills. One is preparations, eye contact, and so on. And we'll see more about this in the next slide. So the methods they're using is BST, behavioral skills training, and all participants demonstrated 40 to 150 increase, which is pretty significant for these target skills. The downside is that the BST took about an hour. So if we have big companies, we have 10, 20, and we want to target this improvement, to target these skills, then we'd have to spend 20 hours just for the BST. All right, so I think we'll discuss the feedback reception skills down here, but okay. So let's talk about the second studies. So Walken and Sellers actually replicated early et al. And they did it on customer service specialist. So it's a bit similar to the first study. But in this study, they scratched 2 components, which is the preparations and making an appreciative statement, because they think that it's not a vital component to receiving feedback. In this study, they use computer-based instruction modules. They actually developed these modules on how to receive feedback. The downside is the modules took 45 hours to develop, so it's very time-consuming and resourceful. But also, I didn't write it here, but the result shows there's increased skills for all the participants. So this study, Flint and Wilder, they examined the use of task clarification, which is a way to essentially clarifies what you need to do. So exactly what behaviors need to be done, and they present it in a form of checklist. So in this study, they have 3 participants recruited from early intensive behavioral clinics who had worked as an RBT for 2 years or less and performed less than 80% on their primary tasks, which will be presented later, and exhibited feedback reception skills less than 70% in the baseline. And of all the participants they recruited, because I think in the EIBA clinic we have more females than males, so we have this, all 3 participants were female, and the age were 20 to 25 years old. Okay, so they have 2 dependent variables. The first one is the percentage of 6 feedback reception skills. So the way they receive feedback, this is the primary TV, and the secondary is actually the performance they need to be done itself. So as the primary, this is the 6 feedback skills that they're targeting to teach. The first one is eye contact. So here I think it's quite nice that they have descriptions, eye contact or orientations to researchers, and this should be occurring throughout the entire feedback delivery sessions. And then asking follow-up questions. So this is when they ask specific questions following the researcher's delivery of feedback, such as clarifications, like, what do you mean by that? Did you mean that when I did this, that things? And it should be done at the end of the feedback delivery session. So it should be after all feedback were given, and then they ask the clarifications. And then engaging in active listening. So the participant would accurately summarizing the feedback they received, indicating that they are attending to the researchers and understanding what was being said to them. And it also should be demonstrated at the end of the session. And then acknowledging corrective feedback. So they should be engaging in yes or no, or even on nonverbal gestures like or like change of facial expressions, and it should be done after each instance of corrective feedback. There's also demonstrating commitment to behavior change. So the participants would need to state vocally how they will change their behavior. So I imagine there's something like the plan that they would craft on their own. Like, for example, I did not take data immediately following the response of the sessions, for example, the EIBI sessions. So I would do something like, all right, so I'm probably going to have my clipboard or my data sheet closer to me, so it would make it easier for me to take data, that type of stuff. And then appropriate overall demeanor. So I think this targeting the overall gestures or the behaviors on when they receive feedback, such as facial expressions. When they're talking, they have even tone, and then they have listening ears, that type of stuff. Like they're in close proximity and not facing the other way, that type of stuff. So I think this also delivered at the end of the session. So as the primary DV, the way they score it is that they did it in a room, and they videotaped the recordings. So yeah, this is the scoring criteria. They were scored either from 0 to 1 or 0 to 2. And the secondary dependent variables was performance on primary task. And these are the primary tasks, which is writing operational definitions, completing session notes, and conducting preference assessments. So these skills or these tasks selected because they involve multiple components on how to complete them, so that the researcher can give feedback on multiple components, which I think similar to with the scoring criteria, similar to the previous ones, so that they have 0, 1, and 2. And this primary task is actually randomly assigned through a system during baseline and treatment conditions. All right. So in the baseline, so it takes me a while to understand the papers, because usually when I read a paper about feedback, then right, this is about the feedback itself, and we're going to see the performance. But now the performance that we're seeing is that the performance when they receive feedback. So hopefully, yeah, if you have difficulties there, just stop me and I can rewind. So in the baseline, during the feedback sessions, they receive feedback. Let me rephrase that. So in the baseline, they did the primary task, and then the feedback was about how they did in the primary tasks. And the feedback is delivered after the task is complete, with durations 3 to 5 minute sessions. And the feedback is scripted and followed a structured format. So the researcher going to be using something like, all right, great job using this, and that. So it has to be behavior specific. And if they did not do what they're supposed to do, it should be something like, the feedback would be something like, I noticed that you left out blank blank. Next time you should do this. So this is the format. It has to be behavior specific, and if it's constructive, it needs to contain what needs to be done for the next performance. All right. Now, after the feedback, the baseline is finished, we start the intervention phase, which is the task clarifications. So during the feedback sessions, the participants will receive a checklist on the behaviors that need to be done throughout the feedback sessions. And after they're given a checklist, they're allowed to review it for like 1 minute. And after that, the feedback sessions begin, and they're taking data on the participants' behavior. So the mastery criteria for this phase is 3 consecutive sessions at or above 90% accuracy, which is pretty high. If the data shows increasing trend for the participant's behavior, then the participant remained in task clarification phase. But if the participant does not meet the criteria within 3 sessions, then a feedback component will be added. So the feedback component would be the feedback on their feedback reception skills. All right. So now we're going to talk about the procedures if the participants did not meet the mastery criteria. So participants will receive another checklist, which is the same checklist they received the first time, and they were also allowed to review it 1 minute before the session. And then after the feedback sessions, the participants were given positive and constructive feedback on their skills. So the first 2 here is an example of positive feedback, and the last 2 is the constructive one. So the feedback component here would sound something like, nice maintaining eye contact while I deliver feedback. Great job asking follow-up questions about your performance. You maintain appropriate overall demeanor for only part of the time. So I think in real life, it should be something like when I give about this, but then sometimes I notice you also move your body away from me, that type of stuff. And then you should acknowledge that the corrective feedback I provided to you. This is referring to the acknowledgement like, okay, yes, or nodding, that type of stuff. So the mastery criteria is the same as the previous phase, which is 3 consecutive above 90%. And this is the results. They have 3 females participants, Maria, Sarah, and Billy. The results indicates, though, that the task clarification was effective for 1 participant, which is Sarah, because as you can see in Sarah, they perform significantly better in the task clarifications, although it did not maintain. But for the other 2 participants, Billy and Maria, they need to be boosted by the feedback sessions. So the task clarification itself is not sufficient to increase performance. So from this particular results, I think the task clarifications, or they think the task clarifications can be alternative to BST or additional component to the BST so that they can have shorter sessions. So the limitation here is that the experiments or the person delivering feedback was the researcher instead of the clinical supervisor. This is also the reason why I mentioned the previous research and feedback that typically the feedback is more effective if the performer respects the person who delivered the feedback. And also, because in this case, the person delivering feedback is not her direct supervisor, then probably, it's not valued as much as their own clinical supervisors. Also, the effects of antecedent strategies, because we're using task clarification, which is a part of antecedent-based strategies, can be time limited in ways that after a certain period of time, we may forget, or we may, we have competing attention to other things that we're not really attending to that antecedent-based strategy. So maybe the one-time delivery of checklists is not efficient or not sufficient enough to the participants to keep doing or to maintain the behaviors. And then they also noted that the feedback receptions skills may appear higher when task performance was lower. So I think definitely this did not happen to all the sessions, but only some sessions of Billy and Sarah. So let me find those. So feedback reception is the black one, and task clarification, performance feedback is the open square. So yeah, for example, maybe this one, like the feedback reception skills are higher when the the primary task performance was lower. So they're thinking that maybe when they feel they did not perform too well, they would value the feedback as more valuable than when they did, or when they feel that they did the performance better. So I think this is an interesting take out of these experiments. I think because one, this particular trend is not observed through all participants, but only some, even in Sarah for like this one, and it does not show any particular consistent patterns. But I agree that maybe this is true. So maybe more research needs to be done on what makes feedback more valuable as a reinforcers for them, so we can, you know, understand what might affecting. Well, one is the efficacy of the feedback, and two is the the feedback receiving skills. And then there's also an interesting thought from the participants as well, that the participants rated active listening and demonstrating commitment to behavior change as less important to others, which is for me also interesting, because anecdotally speaking, from experience talking with supervisors and staffs, I feel like there's multiple ways, multiple ways for us to work. Like we have our own style to do our work. So I think in terms of being receptive to feedback, also they have their own style of receiving feedback. We have people who are like always nodding, yes, yes. And there are also people who are more vocal, like, yes, that's right, I knew it, that type of stuff. And there's people who are just, be there, not moving, not saying anything, but they're listening and they understood. And only at the end of the sessions, then they would make an actions toward that behavior change. So yeah, for this particular thing, I agree, and I find it very interesting. There also raised ethical concerns because they, a lot of people have different styles in receiving feedback. There are emotional ones, there are passionate ones, there are the silent ones, I guess. So how appropriate is this to teach them to respond in such a ways that are not usual as, or not typical as their style? Because it might take more energy, and since we're talking about adults and working in environments, and even though this particular study is done in the EIBI clinic setting, but I'm assuming this is also be important to think of it in other contexts, such as other industries like safeties, or even administrative, like regular company organizations outside of human service settings. So would you mind sharing how you approach feedback, or how you experience in delivering feedback, and what do you think about this particular feedback reception skills?